The Lyle and Erik Menendez Netflix show has been sat at the top of the Netflix Top 10 chart for a little while now, and whilst in terms of a TV show it wasn't as dark or easy to follow as the drama series that Murphy created, it still shone a light on the events that occurred where the two brothers killed their parents in 1989. Amongst the 9 episodes, there was a real gem of one which occurred midway through the series. This was episode 5, which was titled The Hurt Man. This episode was so different to every other one in the season, and from a creative standpoint, it was beautiful and so well executed. But from what the episode was about, it was haunting, uncomfortable, and right up until the very final moment, we saw a transformation of Erik Menendez and 2 different sides to him. So with that, I wanted to break down the episode and discuss why it was such a powerful, disturbing, and haunting episode. So let's get into it. Here is why episode 5 in the Lyle and Erik Menendez show was haunting. The creative execution. The thing about episode 5 of the Lyle and Erik Menendez show is that it was drastically different in terms of the way that the episode was delivered to us when compared to the other 8. This entire 36-minute episode was delivered to us in a single take shot where it was just a conversation between Erik Menendez and Leslie Abramson as the camera slowly zoomed into the face of Erik over the course of the runtime. This was as the trauma and abuse that he suffered was dug out of him, and the smile at the start where he first laid eyes on Leslie transformed into tears at the end with an empty look in the final frame. The approach that Murphy took with this episode was something that really shone a light and put a focus on the words that Erik Menendez was speaking and the emotions that he was feeling. Not in one moment in the episode was Leslie the main subject, it was all on Erik. Hence why her back was to us for the entire time and Erik's face was always in view. She was there to make him feel comfortable and to try and understand everything that he went through, which ultimately made himself and his brother kill his parents and feel like that was the only way out of the situation that they were in, rather than killing them for the financial gain which the prosecutors were going for. This was a complete uncensored version of the horrific things that Erik Menendez went through, and there was no avoiding it. This wasn't like us being a fly on the wall, because if that was the case, the episode would have either had the static shot that we saw at the start at the back of the room not getting closer, or there would have been cuts and different camera angles. This approach put us in the room and it provided a haunting, unsettling, and uncomfortable experience because there was simply no avoiding the uncensored, graphic nature of what was being said. In fact, when it was at its worst, the camera was extremely close to Erik's face, so it was essentially like we were there and his face was filling the frame, so there was actually nothing else to focus on other than the words and the emotions that he was conveying. I'd also say that this episode felt like it had 3 thirds within it. You had the first section where the camera was further back where there was a smile on Erik's face and there was almost a feeling of comfort that was present due to the way that he was looking at Leslie and communicating with her. It was often said that she was kind of the motherly figure that he liked, and apparently there was a sense of care between them, and that came across here. Then I'd say the second section was where the camera then started slowly zooming into him, and Leslie started getting chopped out of the frame. This was as he talked about the abuse that he suffered at the hands of his father. And then the third section was more reflective and upsetting. And you could see the hurt that he was expressing because he was acknowledging how what he went through impacted him in the present day and that he was confused about his sexuality and that he was essentially the hurt man because he couldn't remember a time where he wasn't being abused by his father, so all he felt was pain. Maybe we are sociopaths, but can you blame us for what happened to us? I am the hurt man. It's me. I don't know what I am. I will never know who I am if I don't get out of here. Those words really stuck out in the reflective section of the episode, and it was powerful to hear. With him also referring to the punishment in being locked away and still loving his father, and that being the very thought that would be going around in his head all day if he didn't get out, it provided a soul-stirring backdrop to an eternity of somebody being forced to think about the horrific things that were done to them. It was an episode which really took us on a journey, and whilst it wasn't fancy in terms of the way that it looked, the ability of being able to focus on what Erik was specifically saying made every word hit like a punch, and it simply meant that we couldn't look away. The performance from Cooper Koch. Cooper Koch delivered a standout performance in this episode for a number of different reasons. The fact it was a single take shot meant that there was a lot of pressure to get everything right in one go, and he seamlessly delivered a performance that made you sympathize for a character in that moment. When before, there wasn't really much sympathy present, it was more so conflict about which side to believe. The body language that he gave Erik during this scene was something which made him look vulnerable, fragile, and completely closed off. Something which showed that there was a sense of uncomfort in talking about everything that he went through. He didn't want to go there, but he did. I thought the drastic change from smiling with Leslie and being polite to then becoming reserved, emotional, and upset all in a single take was extremely impressive to see happening right in front of our eyes. Plus, when the camera was right up close in his face, that was where we saw the bulk of the emotions coming out. The tears, the moving from opening up to being more withdrawn, and the self-reflection. His whole demeanor changed several times throughout the episode. The way the conversation bounced between himself and Leslie felt extremely natural, and the pauses and stutters that would occur really highlighted the uncomfortable nature of what was being spoken about and what was going on between them. The final frame. What I found particularly interesting about the performance was the final thing that we saw in the episode. There was almost this look towards Leslie, a look that Cooper hadn't given Erik throughout the entire episode until that final moment. Within this episode, you kind of forgot that confusion was at the heart of the case and the lack of belief from the prosecution that Erik and Lyle were abused by their father. The convincing nature of Cooper's performance as Erik and the way that it was constructed led you to feel for this person in front of us in that moment as he went into detail about everything that he went through. However, that final look that he gave Leslie after acknowledging the fact that maybe he was a sociopath because of what happened to him, I feel like it was included as the last thing that we saw to make us question whether or not Erik was actually telling the truth or not. Because, as I mentioned, the whole theme of this series was confusion around who was telling the truth and what actually went on behind closed doors with the family. That look didn't appear once throughout the conversation other than right at the end, and it followed on from him being in tears and also saying that he might be a sociopath. There was just something about it, you know, almost like we got a look under the mask and that the performance was actually fake. Like I said, it was another thing that leaned into the theme of the show, and it was almost like Ryan Murphy wanted us to feel sympathy for this character. But then, at the end, he wanted to make us question if he did actually go through it, because that's exactly what the prosecution were arguing against. My final thoughts on the episode. This was definitely one of the heavier episodes in the series because of the subject matter that it was focused on, but at the same time, it was the shortest. It's a prime example of how less can sometimes be more. We only had one man sitting there talking and one woman opposite asking questions and sympathizing with him. Everything that was spoken sat in our mind for the entirety of the episode because there were no distractions. We heard of the most sickening and evil things that could be done to somebody, and when the episode finished, it lingered. The creative execution of this episode is what really stands out about it, and the performance is what does it as well. The slow zooms and everything that is discussed creates an unsettling atmosphere and contributes to why this episode was haunting to watch. So, there you have it, why episode 5 in the Lyle and Erik Menendez show was haunting. If you want to see a full breakdown of the show where I also compare it to the true events, then click on the card in the top corner. Or if you'd like to see more of your favorite TV shows and movies broken down, then head over to my channel. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thanks for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one.